Good morning, students. So today we will start with session number 6 of our lesson Control and Coordination. Now students, we have completed one part of this lesson, that is control and coordination in case of animals, and we learned about the control and coordination in case of human beings, and we learned that the control and coordination in human beings is brought about by two systems, that is the nervous system and the endocrine system. We studied in detail about the nervous system, that is the central nervous system made up of brain and spinal cord, and we studied the relationship between brain and spinal cord. To assess the central nervous system, we saw that there is yet another type of nervous system which is called as a peripheral nervous system. Then we studied about another type which is a nervous system called as the autonomic nervous system. Correct. So that was what we had done in the nervous system part of this lesson. Then we went to study the endocrine system. Now in the endocrine system, we studied about all the endocrine glands, their position in our body, their functions, and the disorders caused due to the deficiency of hormones of this endocrine glands. So this is what we have done till session 5 of this lesson. Now students, today we are going to start with the session 6, and from the session 6 part of this lesson we are going to study about control and coordination in case of plants. Okay, now in plants also there is control and coordination, but there is limited control and coordination, because you very well know that in case of plants the nervous system is absent. So here the control and coordination is done by the hormonal system. Okay, so now we will proceed ahead with the lesson. So let's start here. Yes. Now let's talk about the movement in plants. Does the plant show movement? Yes. I know you people are getting confused between the movement and locomotion in plants. So I will just tell you what is the difference between a movement of an organism and what is a locomotion. Okay, yes. See here. The plants remain fixed to the ground, so they do not move from one place to another. That means they do not locomote. All of you agree with the fact? Yes. So plants do not have the ability of locomotion, but they can move the individual parts of their plant body. Like they can move the stem. You might have seen the stem moving towards the light. Okay, they can move the flower. You know that the sunflower faces the sun. And they can move the other part, that is the root. Okay, root always move towards the water as well as soil. Now, the movement in higher plants are chiefly in the form of bending, twisting, and spiraling. Okay, now here I have the images here. You can see here. Yes, students, here you can see the bending movement of a leaf. You can see the twisting movement of a leaf in the presence of wind. Here you can see here there is a spiraling movement of a tendril. Tendril are green spiral structures in the plant. So these are some of the movement which we have seen here. Okay, now let us study now the further part of the plant movement. Now, these plant movements can be spontaneous. What do you mean by spontaneous? Spontaneous means it can be very fast. Now, example of a spontaneous plant movement. Spontaneous plant movement we experience in case of the insectivorous plants. Like example, pitcher plant, which you have studied in the 7th standard. The lid of the pitcher plants get closed as soon as the insect enters into the pitcher plant. Okay, or it can be a sloth. So that is an example of a spontaneous movement. Another example of spontaneous movement I can give you is the drooping of the leaves of the plant called as touch me not. When it receives the stimulus, that is touch, at that time what happens to the leaves? The leaves tend to droop down. That we will discuss further in detail. And the spiraling. Okay, so these are the different these are the different types of spontaneous movements which you can see. Now at the same time some movements are slow. Now which are the slow movements? Now slowly the stem is going to move towards the light. So it is a slow movement. The root moving, searching the water and moving towards the water is a slow movement. Now these movements, whether it is spontaneous or slow, may be or may not be dependent upon the external stimuli. And we will check out which are the movements which are dependent on external stimuli and which do not need external stimuli. Okay, so have you understood the movements in plants? I hope all of you might have understood the difference between locomotion and movement. Locomotion, when the entire organism moves from one point to another point, but movement will be nothing but a part of the body of the organism is moving. So in plants the locomotion is absent but movement is possible. It can move the different parts like that of root, stem and flower and leaves. Now let's go to see the types of movement in case of plants. Yes. Yes. Now movements in plants are dependent upon are of two types. One is called as a tropic movements. Now tropic movements are the movements which are dependent on growth. So movements in plants, we are studying the first type of movement, that is a tropic movements. And this tropic movements are the movements which are dependent on growth. And this tropic movements are the directional movements. What do you mean by the word directional movements? That means their direction will be always towards the stimulus. That means they are dependent upon the stimulus. Now, let us study the different type of tropic movements. We have the different type of tropic movements like phototropism, when a part of the plant move towards the stimulus, that is the light. Geotropism, where the part of the plant is going to bend towards the earth, towards the gravity. Hydrotropism, here the part is going to move or bend towards the water. Chemotropism, do you remember chemoreceptors, students? We had studied chemoreceptors in the nervous system, correct? So chemo means touch. So here the chemotropism, the stimulus is touch. Okay, and chemotropism, here the stimulus is different type of chemicals. We will individually deal with all this type of tropic movements as phototropism, geotropism, hydrotropism, chemotropism and chemotropism. Now, so this is regarding the tropic movements. So tropic movements are the movements which are dependent on growth, and this tropic movements are directional movement and they move towards the direction of the stimuli. Now, let us see the next movement in plants. The next movement in plants is a nastic movement. Now, nastic movement, the movement independent of growth. It is not related to growth, and these nastic movements are non-directional movement. Okay, it is not going to move towards a particular stimulus. So this you call it as a non-directional movement. Now, example of a nastic movement is the immediate response of stimulus. Like here example, the drooping of leaves of touch me not plant on touching it. On touching a touch me not plant, it is not going to look in the direction from where the touch has come. It is going to droop. So that means it is a non-directional movement. Correct. At the same time, the drooping of the leaves is not dependent upon the growth. So it is a growth independent movement. So these are the characters of nastic movement. Now let's go to the next slide. Yes. So here we are going to study about the growth independent movement, that is the nastic movement. The movement which are not growth related are called as the nastic movements. These movements occur in response to the environmental stimulus. As I told you, the example is that of the touch me not plant. Now here I will show you the picture of a touch me not plant. See, this is the picture of a touch me not plant. It is in the normal stage, IS state, nobody has touched it. So you can see the leaves remaining in the expanded state. So, the direction of response in a nastic movement is not dependent on the direction of stimulus, that which we already discussed in the previous slide. Example, nastic movement. Tigmo, as I told you, touch. So, nastic movement. Now, in which plants do you see the nastic movement? Now, this nastic movement is seen in case of the touch me not plant. So, let's see the next slide now. Now, students, here you can see this is before the stimulus. Now this diagram which you are seeing here, this is before the stimulus. Can you see all the leaves in the expanded state over here? Can you see? Yeah. Now after the touch, after the stimulus is given, What is happening here? Can you see all the leaves are drooping down? All the leaves are folding, correct or not? So here, this is an example of Nastic Moment. Now this Nastic Moment is dependent upon a principle which is called as turgidity. Turgidity, and turgidity is a type of force which is there in a plant due to the presence of water. Okay, now let's read here. Nastic Moment. The movement in the touch me not plant is a Nastic Moment. Okay, it is non-directional, it is independent of growth, correct? So this was the Nastic Moment, and in this we took the example of Nastic Moment. Example, the drooping of the leaves of the touch me not plant. Now let's go to the next part, students. Now the next slide which you are learning is the growth related movement. And as we mentioned before, the growth related movement is a tropic movement. Now in the tropic movement, students, you can see the picture over here. See, it is here, the sun is the stimulus. You can see the sun is the stimulus. Can you see the stem is moving towards bending and coming towards the sun? Yes. At the same time, you can see in the second diagram, this is a root here. Can you see the root is moving towards the gravity in material, in whichever position I keep that flower pot, you can see the root is moving towards the earth. So geotropic. Okay. So now let's see the tropic movements. So those are the examples of tropic movements in general. Individually we will deal with it. The movements which are growth related are called tropic movements. This movement occur in response to environmental stimuli. We discussed a series of stimuli, and the direction of response is dependent upon the direction of the stimulus, which we already saw in this picture, that the stem is moving towards the direction of light, and you can see the root is moving towards the gravity or the earth. So it is moving towards a stimulus. So now let's see the next slide. So this is just an introduction to the tropic movement. Now individually we will study the different type of tropic movements. Yes. Now students, first we will see phototropism. Okay. Now what is phototropism? Phototropism is the movement of plant parts in response to light. The movement of the plant parts in response to light is called as phototropism. So whenever an organ is going to move towards the site of stimulus, at that time we use the word positive phototropism. Whenever an organ of a plant is moving towards the direction of the stimulus, then you call it as word positive. We put this word positive before that particular phenomenon. So this is called positive phototropism. And if it is moving away from light, in that case you call it as negative phototropism. Stem always move towards light. So stem is positively phototropic, whereas roots move away from light. That means the roots are negatively phototropic. Now let's look into the picture here. Here in this picture, students, you can see this is the stimulus, that is, you can see here the sunlight, phototropism. So light is the stimulus. So you can see the plant is growing in the upward direction. Okay, so this is this picture. Now let's see the next picture over here. Okay, yeah. So now here I have kept a plant inside the house, and here there is a window, and through the window you can see the sun rays is entering inside. So you can see that the stem is slowly bending towards the sunlight, because the plant requires light, sunlight for photosynthesis. So it is searching and it is moving towards the stimulus, that is light. Okay, now at the same time you can see at the lower part you can see the root is trying to bend away from the light, because you know that the roots are negatively phototropic. Is it clear? Yes. So now let's go to the next slide. So here in the next slide we will study geotropism. What is geotropism? the movement of plant parts in response to Earth's gravitational force is called as geotropism or gravitropism. Is called as geotropism or gravitropism. So, if the part is moving towards the gravity, it is positive geotropism. If it is away from the gravity, then it is negative geotropism. Now, roots always tend to move towards gravity. Since the roots are moving towards the gravity, it is positively geotropic. Whereas the stem will never move towards the gravity or the soil. So, the stem is or the shoot is negatively geotropic. Is that clear? Now, let's discuss what's there in the picture. Yes. Now students, here I have three pots here. I have arranged the pots in different form. Okay, one I have kept it straight, so you can see the force of gravity will be in this direction. So you can see the root is growing downward towards the earth and towards the gravity here. What is there? Here I can keep the pot tilted. It was one direction. Okay, so what is there? The gravitational force will be in this particular direction. So can you see the root slowly growing here in the downward direction? Okay, so here see the root is bending. You can see here the root is bending here towards the gravity. You can see it is towards the gravity, towards the earth, towards the gravity, whereas you can see here the stem is moving away from the gravity. Okay, so here we can say this is positively, the root is positively geotropic, whereas the stem is negatively geotropic. Okay. So that was regarding geotropism or gravitropism. Now let's move to the next slide, students. And in the next slide, we are going to study hydrotropism. Now what is hydrotropism? The movement of plants in part in response to water is known as hydrotropism. If the organ or the part is moving towards water, then it is positive hydrotropism. It is moving away from the water, then it is negative hydrotropism. Roots move towards water, and so it will be what? Positive hydrotropism. And away from light, so it will be away from light, so it will be what? Negatively phototropic. Okay, so here we will see here now, students, you can see this is a moist soil, which is a moist soil over here. You can see the root is growing straight. Okay, because the soil is moist, the root is growing very nicely, luxuriantly there, and absorbing a large amount of water. Now let us see here the next diagram. This is quite interesting, students. Okay, now here what I do is I'm having a pot here, correct? Now in this pot I am going to fill what dry soil. The soil is totally dry. It is not having water at all. Then what I do is I dig an area and I am going to introduce a clay pot. You know that the clay pot is porous. And in the clay pot, what I am going to do is I am going to fill water. Because the clay pot is porous, what is going to happen is the water is going to ooze out of the clay pot, come out of the clay pot. So as the water is going to come out, don't you feel in this particular area the soil is going to be moist? So what is happening? Instead of the root growing downwards, straight downward, it is moving towards the direction of stimuli. Can you see it coming over here? Correct. Can you see it coming over here? It is moving towards the moist soil. This tells us that the root is positively hydrotropic. Okay. Let's move to the next slide now. Now here, chemotropism. The movement of plant parts in response to chemical stimuli is known as chemotropism. Okay, if it moves towards a particular chemical, then it is positive chemotropism. If it moves away from the chemical, then it is negative chemotropism. Now this can be best explained with the growth of pollen tube towards the ovule, which is a positive chemotropism. So let me explain the diagram here now. Now students, I have drawn a carpel here. All of you may be aware of the word carpel. Carpel is a part of the flower. The gynoecium is made up of carpel. And the carpel consists of three parts, that is stigma, style and ovary. stigma, style and ovary. It is on the stigma that the pollen grains are deposited. So I will deposit the pollen grain on the stigma. Okay, now the stigma has to on the stigma, so there is deposition of pollen grain. The pollen grain has to break the stigma, move through the style, and it has to come to the ovary, because in the ovary what is present? Ovule is present. Okay, and this movement of the pollen tube is dependent upon the chemical. So here I show you here now. See students. This is nothing but the pollen grains which are deposited on the stigma. This pollen grain is forming a tube which is called as a pollen tube. The pollen tube is slowly coming into the ovary. In the ovary what is present? Ovule is present. So here it is coming and it is fertilizing the ovule. Students, the detailed part of this fertilization and formation of a fruit we will study in reproduction in living organism, where you will study plant reproduction and animal reproduction. So here this is an example of chemotropism. The movement of the pollen tube to the ovary is an example of chemotropism. Positive chemotropism rather. Now let's move to the next slide. Now, Chemotropism. The movement of plants in response to touch is known as chemotropism. Okay, if it is towards the touch, then it is positive chemotropism. It is away from the touch, then it is negative chemotropism. Example, the coiling of the tendril. Coiling may be a type of a movement. So movement of tendrils around a support is positive chemotropism, which you see in case of the money plant in your house. The money plant, it coils over the grill of your balcony. So here this is the grill of the balcony is a support. So there it is coiling because there is a contact. That is a contact is there. So the contact will be nothing but touch. So that will be chemotropism. So here I will just diagram, you can see. So now this is a plant with a weak stem. Because it is a weak stem, it cannot stand erect. If it has to stand erect, the plant will produce the green spiral structures called tendril, and this tendril is coiling over a support. Okay, so here this is example of chemotropism. So now students, what are the different type of tropic movements which we have studied? Point number 1 we studied was phototropism. The stimulus was light. The second one we studied was geotropism, that is towards the soil or gravity. The third one which we studied was the hydrotropism, that is the movement towards the water. And the fourth one we studied was chemotropism, that is nothing but the growth of the pollen tube. The movement of the pollen tube from the stigma to the ovary is dependent on the chemical. And the last we studied was chemotropism, in which the stimulus was touch. So we have completed all the 5 different types of tropic movements with examples. Okay. Now students, let's move over to the next slide. And it's time for your assignments. Okay. Now what assignment questions? State the difference between the tropic and nastic moment. So you have to say that which one is growth related, which one is not growth related. Okay. So that is what the examples of tropic and example of nastic you have to write. Write short note on phototropism and geotropism. So describe phototropism, how the stem is moving towards the light, how the root is moving towards the gravity, that you describe in detail along with the diagram. Okay. Next, draw a chart. The chart which I had explained there. So draw a chart to explain the different type of movement in plants. I just show you the chart once again. So this is your chart which you have to draw. That is the movement in plants. Just enlarge and show you so things are very clear. Okay, this is the tropic movements and these are your nastic movements. Okay, so that marks the end of this session. Thank you students.